Hello, fellow Shakespeareans. It's time for another episode of SONGspeare. This is episode 15, Twelfth Night. On the 12th night of Christmas, Will Shakespeare gave to me, not the 12th episode, 15th night. 12th night is a reference to the 12th night after Christmas, which in older Christianity or current Christianity is a feast day celebrating the Epiphany. Back in the day, that was a holiday that involved feasting and drinking and merriment and the kind of things we see in the play 12th Night, namely servants might dress up as their betters and they might even be waited on by their masters. It's like the lost episode of Downton Abbey. Men might also dress as women, women might dress as men, so it has a lot to do with what happens in the play Twelfth Night. However, there's little evidence in the play itself that it's supposed to be set around that holiday Twelfth Night or around Christmas time at all. Some productions choose to do this, but it's not really from the play itself. There's subject matter that does remind us of Twelfth Night, the holiday. It's a very musical play with the clown character Festa giving 5 songs throughout the entire play if you do them all, but there are also instances of court music in Duke Orsino's court where he says very famous Shakespeare lines about music, "If music be the food of love, play on." There are also songs that are sung by Toby, Sir Andrew, and Festa, just drinking and carousing around. There are rounds to sing, so it's a very musical play on Shakespeare's part. Many of the songs that are featured in the play are probably just songs that were popular around Shakespeare's day, and for some research on what those songs might have sounded like, or where they might have come from, or what Shakespeare might have meant to be sung during the play, check out Ross Deffen's scholarship, which I will link to YouTube links below. One song, "O Mistress Mine," has a particularly early setting that's possibly written by William Byrd that could be a surviving melody from Shakespeare's time, although we're not sure if it was actually the one that was used in his first production of Twelfth Night. Because of the popularity of Twelfth Night and because of how musical it is, composers have really given it a lot of love. There are much loved settings of the songs from Twelfth Night by Gerald Finzi, Eric Korngold, Roger Quilter. I'm not going to sing any of those because they're just too popular, but I encourage you to go check them out. There are actually a lot of song settings of the clown songs, so you see them published that way a lot, and it's all of the songs that Festa sings throughout the play. Korngold's are called the clown songs or songs of the clown or something like that. So go forth and look up other music from Twelfth Night because I'm not going to do it here. What we will be hearing are 3 of the sung songs in the play, "O Mistress Mine," "Come Away Death," and the final song, "When That I Was and a Little Tiny Boy." And we will also be hearing settings of 2 songs that sort of come from dialogue or quasi-dialogue. One of them is Viola's monologue that begins, "She never told her love," and the other is Jolly Robin, which Festa sings while Malvolio is sort of yelling at him, so you could consider it dialogue or singing. Those are the 5 titles of the songs that you'll be hearing, but there are 10 of them, so let's get to it. This episode features contributions from 5 other musicians than myself, so thank you so much to my collaborators, Cindy Lindeen-Martin, Chloe Scull, Margaret Ozaki Graves, Camille Jasensky, and Sam Martin. Starting us off are 3 settings of "O Mistress Mine." Amy Beach needs very little introduction. She was a major American composer. She's ours! She was also sort of like very into Britain as well, but she's an American. The first chronologically of our 3 settings of "O Mistress Mine." This one is sort of light and playful. It's very indicative of the sentimental sort of Victorian style of Amy Beach's early style, not really her later style, but also just the Victorian English and American musical sentimentality. There are some surprising harmonic shifts and a little bit of chromaticism, but nothing too threatening or mind-blowing. This performance is also one of 2 in this episode that don't feature me at all, which I love. For 2 songs in this episode, Margaret Ozaki Graves contributed her soprano voice. Margaret has sung with the Chicago Lyric Opera, the LA Opera, she's sung in Weimar, Germany, she's sung across Colorado and in the Denver area, and she's also the education coordinator for Central City Opera in Central City, Colorado. She's an artist and a cultural consultant for the Japanese Arts Network, which is an organization that focuses on creating art centered around Japanese artistry with cultural intention and sensitivity. She also performs and works with Art Song Colorado and Breaking Glass Arts. All of her credits can be seen below. I encourage you to check them out, including her YouTube channel. Our pianist for this performance is Cindy Lindeen-Martin, who has contributed quite a bit to SONGspeare episodes. She is the director of music and the organist at Church of the Ascension in Denver, Colorado. She's also a pretty big deal in like the American Guild of Organists and all these different things. She's like a great organist, great pianist, great person. So thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Margaret, for joining me on this episode. Starting us off in the late 19th century, here is Amy Beach's setting of O Mistress Mine.
Oh, mistress mine, where are you roaming? Oh, stay and hear your true love's calling. I can sing both high and low, both high and low. Trip no further, pretty sweetie. Journey's end in lovers' meeting. Trip no further, pretty sweetie. Journey's end in lovers' meeting. Every wise man's son doth know. Every wise man's son What is love? 'Tis not hereafter. Present with her present laughter. What's to come is still unsure. What's to come is still unsure. In delay there lies no plenty. Then come kiss me, sweet and twenty. In delay there lies no plenty. Then come kiss me, sweet and twenty. Youth so stiff I not endure. Youth so stiff I not endure.
Our second chronological setting of O Mistress Mine is by Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, who was a British composer and conductor who we've featured on SONGspeare before. He was a major presence in Britain of the 20th century, early 20th century. He was mostly successful for a series of cantatas called The Song of Hiawatha, and particularly the first cantata in that series, which actually was performed and sold tons and tons of copies, although he didn't get most of the money from it. He sold the rights to it, which was pretty common at the time for composers to sell the rights for immediate money. This performance also features Margaret Ozaki Graves, with me on the piano this time, and this version of O Mistress Mine is a lot more lyrical and flowing. It's sort of in a light triple time with a lot of speeding up and slowing down. There are large leaps in the voice. It's a bit more romantic than the Amy Beach. So of the three, this one is probably the most romantic and florid. Here is Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's setting of O Mistress Mine.
Oh, mistress mine, where are you roaming? Oh, stay and hear your true love's coming, that can sing both high and low. Trip no further, pretty sweetie. Journeys end in lovers' meeting. Every wise man's son doth know. Every wise man's son doth know. kiss me, sweet and 20, youth the staff will not endure. Youth the staff will not
Our third and final setting of O Mistress Mine is by Geoffrey Bush, who is a British composer that I've been really excited to discover during my SONGspeare adventure. This one actually comes from a larger work called Twelfth Night and Entertainment, which is scored for tenor soloist, chamber orchestra, and choir. And if anybody has a chamber orchestra and a choir sitting around, it's a really cool work, and you know of a tenor who's pretty familiar with the work now. Seriously, as far as I could tell, it's never been recorded professionally, and I would absolutely love it if somebody wanted to do this piece, and especially to record it, because it's great music and people can't hear it. I hate that! Like a lot of Geoffrey Bush's music that I've found so far, at least the up-tempo stuff, this just has this crazy, unrelenting forward momentum, this really energetic rhythmic drive that is probably really impressive with an orchestral version, but you'll just have to settle for the piano reduction until somebody wants to produce the full version with a soloist. Get it? I want to do this piece. Our final and most chronologically late setting of O Mistress Mine, this is the most sort of rollicking, lusty version of it. This one probably picks up more of the romantic undertones, we'll call them, of the poetry. So, you know, it's from the 1950s, so things were a little bit less puritanical. Here is Geoffrey Bush's setting of O Mistress Mine in a piano reduction from the larger work Twelfth Night and Entertainment.
Oh, mistress mine, where are you roaming? Oh, stay and hear your trolls coming, that can sing both high and low. Trip no further, pretty sweeting, journey's end in lovers' meeting. Every wise man's son doth know. What is love? 'Tis not hereafter. Present mirth hath present laughter. What's to come is still unsure. In delay there lies no plenty. Then come, kiss me, sweet and 20. Youth's a staff will not endure.
We now turn our attention to death. Specifically, the song Come Away Death, which has actually attracted a lot of composers. Composers kind of love to write about death, especially an art song, but it also has very descriptive poetry that's very active for a song about death and burial and the end of life. Corpses are laid in cypress, bones are thrown, breaths are flying all over the place, 1,000 sighs are sighed. The poetry offers a lot of sort of action and movement, so it's not just about death, but it also has these things that are very tempting to set to music and create something that goes with all that motion. We also have 3 settings of Come Away Death, and we're going to go through them in chronological order again. The first one is by Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco. We've heard a lot from him during SONGspeare. He's an Italian composer, very well known as a composer for the guitar in the 20th century, and I just am always floored by how great his vocal music is and how he's really not very well known as a vocal composer. I think of the 33 Shakespeare songs that I found, or 30-something, there's another 30-some sonnet settings, and then there's probably a bunch more vocal music. So if you don't know the vocal music of Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco and you're like a singer yourself, or you are a singing teacher at a university, go find it, because it's all really good. There's a tendency for composers to refer to Come Away Death as a dirge. It's sort of like a funeral dirge, a little, like a funeral march. This one doesn't have that subtitle. Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco didn't give it the subtitle dirge, but it's probably the most dirge-like of the three settings. There's this unrelenting sort of slow pulse that just continues through the piano the entire time. It moves from low to high, back to low, but it never really gives up. Between verses, it sort of skips just a little bit, but otherwise we do get this feeling of methodical, regular pulses that isn't quite as prominent in the other two. The vocal line also moves very gradually upward in sort of repetitive, motivic figures that you could imagine somebody sort of, in a slow procession making their vocal way through this. It's not a really showy vocal line. It's pretty tame. And this whole thing creates a very suspenseful, foreboding, never climactic, but just very almost claustrophobic sense. At least, that's how I performed it. If you think differently, go perform it yourself and record it and put it on YouTube. This is Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco's setting of Come Away Death.
Cypress, let me be laid. Fly away, breath. I am slain by a fair cruel maid. My shroud of white stuck all with you. Oh, prepare it, my part of death. No one so true did share it. Not a flower, not a flower sweet on my black coffin, let there be strewn. Not a friend, not a friend greet my poor corpse where my bones shall be thrown. A thousand sighs to save, lay me, oh, where sad true lovers never find my grave. To weep there.
Our second setting of Come Away Death is by Madeleine Dring. She was also an English composer. I feature a lot of English people, but it's Shakespeare. They kind of like him. She was a pretty prolific composer, but she also really loved the stage. So she wrote instrumental works and songs, but she also wrote a lot for radio and television and for ballets and an opera. She wrote quite a bit for staged media. She's not super well known today, but she did write volumes and volumes of songs, among other works, and she studied with heavy hitters like Ralph Vaughan Williams and Herbert Howells, although her music doesn't really owe a lot to them. She was a little bit more modernist, and she really liked the music of Poulenc, for example. Her setting of Come Away Death reflects this sort of modernism, although it's pretty smooth. So there are surprising harmonic shifts, but the vocal line is very gradual. It didn't take a ton of practice to get these angular leaps. It's not the most modernist, but it is definitely harmonically forward-thinking, and there are some surprises in there. Unlike the Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco, this one has a variety of different piano textures, so it's not this sort of steady slog. There's different sections have very different feelings in the accompaniment and in the vocal line. So here is a new composer to me, Madeleine Dring, and her setting of Come Away Death.
Come away, death, and in sad cypress let me be laid. Fly away, breath, I am slain by a fair cruel maid. My shroud of white stock all with you. Come prepared. My part of death no one so true did share it. Not a flower sweet on my black coffin let there be strewn. Not a friend greet my poor corpse, where my bones shall be thrown. Thousand sighs to save, lay me, oh, where sad true lover never find my grave. Lay me, oh, where sad true lover never find my grave. To
Our third and chronologically latest setting of Come Away Death is the pretty popular one by Dominick Argento from his Six Elizabethan Songs. This is the second performance in this episode that doesn't feature me at all, and it actually comes from a previously recorded recital by Camille Jasensky, soprano, and Sam Martin, collaborative pianist. I featured a different work from the same recital, also from Dominick Argento's Six Elizabethan Songs, in an earlier episode, I think Love's Labour's Lost. Ironically, this is the only setting of Come Away Death that is actually called Dirge, and it is probably the least dirge-like in general. The piano sort of starts off and ends very, very floaty. It's this very high, we don't get a lot of bass voice, and it floats around, and it's hardly seems even aware of the vocalist. And the vocal rhythms are very conversational, the melody's a little bit more angular, certainly not something that you would expect from a funeral dirge. The central section is a little bit more full-bodied and lyrical, almost ballad-like, but also not super dirge-like. The tempo is slow. Maybe that's all it takes to be a dirge in Dominick Argento's book. It seems like ages ago I asked Camille if I could use these two videos, and I'm super happy that I can finally feature this one because I finally got around to Twelfth Night. So here is Camille Jasensky, soprano, and Sam Martin, collaborative pianist, in their rendition of Dirge from Dominick Argento's Six Elizabethan Songs, which is a setting of Come Away Death.
Come away.
Our next pair of songs represents a little bit of a departure of my usual form for me. Normally, I don't like to perform anything for these episodes that's super well known or super well trod. If there's, 100 fantastic singers who've recorded it, I would, people can just go look that up. I like to find more obscure things. But I had to include one piece that I just absolutely love, even though it's pretty well known and somewhat popular and has been recorded. It is Joseph Haydn's She Never Told Her Love, which is actually a dialogue section spoken by Viola as Cesario about her, sort of metaphorically, about her current predicament. This piece was one of the first ones that I collected and started making this giant list of Shakespeare songs that I have been making for the last couple years. And so in some ways it spurred the entire project along, and it was that list that was sitting around when I started reading the Shakespeare 2020 project, and I thought, oh, I should put these two things together. Despite all that, and despite the love that I have for the song, I wasn't going to record it, but what tipped the scales was its extreme similarity to another setting of the same text by Clara Kathleen Rogers, so I decided to put them both on this episode for comparison's sake. Rogers is considered an American composer, although she was born in England and educated in Germany, and then kind of toured around Europe and then eventually settled in Boston. She's ours! She was one of the youngest people, I think the youngest person ever admitted to the Leipzig Conservatory when she was admitted there, and it's possible that some of her compositions actually encouraged them to start offering composition classes to young girls, which is pretty cool. Her initial studies led her into singing and opera. She premiered as an opera singer in Italy and toured to the United States, where she met a lawyer and got married and wound up settling in Boston. So that's why she's an American composer. Once she was settled down in Boston, she composed more and taught singing. She was actually a professor at the New England Conservatory, and in addition to the songs that she wrote and some other instrumental pieces that she composed, she wrote a lot about singing. So she wrote, I think she wrote like a multi-volume autobiography, but she also wrote on the art of singing in nonfiction forms. Now, Haydn's setting of She Never Told Her Love is from somewhere around 1795. The setting by Rogers is probably around 1882. So nearly 100 years later, she goes and writes this setting of the same words. And the reason I wanted to do both of them on this episode was because I just feel like she must have known Haydn's setting, because hers seems like a spiritual successor. Even though it uses 19th century harmony, the melodic line sort of recalls the Haydn. They both use really surprising chords on words like grief or she sat like patience on a monument. The way that the first time we hear about grief, there's this surprising chord that sort of sets us off kilter, and then the second time it's repeated, it actually resolves to a more friendly harmony. It's not necessarily an analytical comparison that would have held up in my theory courses, but give the two a listen, and I think it really seems like she was recalling the Haydn when she wrote her own setting. First, you'll hear my rendition of the Haydn, and then after that, you will hear Chloe Scull, who is a soprano, singing the setting by Kathleen Rogers. We were actually able to do this sort of in person several months ago, even though we were distanced quite a ways away. We were in the same room, and Chloe was about 40 to 50 feet away from me. Chloe and I go way back, having first met in a youth production of Into the Woods, which I was music directing, and where she was playing Rapunzel, and also An Ear of Corn. It actually makes a lot of sense if you know Into the Woods. Along with just being a rad soprano in her own right, Chloe is also involved with breaking glass arts along with Margaret Ozaki Graves. So back to back, for comparison's sake, here are two settings of She Never Told Her Love, first by Haydn and the second by Clara Kathleen Rogers.
never told her love, but let concealment like a worm in the bud feed on her damask cheek. She sat like patience on a monument, smiling, smiling at grief. Smiling, smiling at She sat like patience
Our next piece comes from a moment in Twelfth Night that is not really dialogue, but also not just like a sit down, everybody's going to listen to a song moment. It comes from the scene when Malvolio has been imprisoned by our practical jokesters, and it's just after the clown, Festa, has disguised himself as Sir Topus and sort of analyzed Malvolio as a madman. He goes off stage, and then he comes back as himself, the clown character, singing "Ah, Robin, gentle Robin," so that Malvolio will know that it is him, not the person he was just pretending to be. There are actually moments where Malvolio is supposed to interrupt him in the song, and there are spaces in the music, which is sort of interesting. As Festa sings the song, Malvolio is calling to him, "Fool, fool," and kind of interrupting him. This setting is without those interjections, although there are musical spaces where you could put them in, I guess. The music is by Julius Harrison, who was another English composer, also very, very well known as a conductor, probably better known as a conductor, especially of operas. But he was a pretty prolific composer and also arranger. If you've ever sung the SATB version of Britain's A Ceremony of Carols, Julius Harrison is the arranger of that. In addition to vocal songs, he also wrote part songs, instrumental works, works for orchestra. He wrote quite a bit of music. Harrison's setting of Jolly Robin features a very lilting kind of accompaniment in 3 and a high vocal line that just sort of floats around, very, very long notes, and it clocks in at just under a minute. For that reason, it's kind of an interesting, tiny little morsel of a song, and it's intriguing to consider that you could actually perform this one on stage since it's so short and there are musical pauses where Malvolio could be interrupting Festa. The lightness and the just sort of airiness of the whole thing really contrasts with the fact that they've put Malvolio in prison and, you know, they're taking him through this whole thing. So it might actually be a really funny irony if it was done that way. So this song might be equally suited to a recital hall as it is to a stage production of Twelfth Night. It is Julius Harrison's setting, Jolly Robin.
Hey Robin, jolly Robin, tell me how thy lady does. My lady is unkind, pity. Alas, why is she so? She loves another. Ah, she loves another.
Our final song also comes to us from Julius Harrison, and it was published simply as Clown's Song, although we've learned that that doesn't actually mean very much because the clown sings so much in Twelfth Night. Specifically, it is the song that begins with the text, "When that I was and a little tiny boy," and it's the song that ends the entire Twelfth Night play. Twelfth Night actually ends with this song that Festa sings to the audience. Even though the song ends the play on a kind of typical Shakespearean note of asking the audience to like what they've done or keep their mouth shut, sort of, promising that actors will either try harder next time or send you away having enjoyed your night, Harrison only sets the first 3 stanzas of the poem. So it's more of the blustery, stormy side of the refrain, "The rain, it raineth every day." Very, very pessimistic way to end the show if you didn't actually have the rest of the text. So showcasing the more violent side of When That I Was and a Little Tiny Boy, this is Julius Harrison's setting, simply called Clown's Song.
When that I was and a little tiny boy, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, a foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain, it raineth every day. But when I came to man's estate, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, 'gainst knave and thief men shut their gates, Then I came, alas, to wive with hay-ho, the wind and the rain. By swaggering could I never thrive, for the rain, it raineth every day.
Not only was that the final song in this episode, in a way, it represents an end of sorts to the SONGspeare journey. After 15 episodes, we've completed our entire journey through all of the Shakespeare plays that have a significant number of art song settings by classical composers. It only took 15 months! That is 1 month per episode. Meh. That may not mean that it's the end of SONGspeare. It's certainly not the end of singing Shakespeare words to music, but it might be a little bit of a pause for now. I do have about 80 to 90 sonnet settings waiting for me to play through and analyze. But now is a good time to sort of slow down and just consider SONGspeare in its full totality. It's also a time for thank yous. So thank you, a huge thank you to Ian Dosher. You don't know me, I sort of know you, but he arranged the Shakespeare 2020 reading project, which is what I was doing when I decided to start this crazy SONGspeare thing. So thank you for encouraging that to happen. Also, thank you to the reading group in there who inspired me and has been watching some of these episodes and cheering me along. That's all been really great. Another huge thank you to my many collaborators, different pianists that have worked with me, guitarists and accompanists of all kinds, people who sang for me and contributed videos to me. Especially huge thank you to Cindy Lindeen-Martin, who I think by my count contributed to 9 out of the 15 episodes of SONGspeare, which is over half. So if you've watched any of these, chances are you've seen an accompaniment that she provided for me. So thank you so much, Cindy. I literally could not have done it without you. And of course, thank you to all of you, all of the people who have been watching and listening and commenting and reacting. This project began as a way for me to sort of contextualize all of the Shakespeare that I was reading, but also as a way to spend some time during a pandemic when I was cooped up in my apartment and didn't have a lot of musical outlets and there was not a lot of performing going on. But it's really turned into a very unique way to connect with people and to share art with people and to sort of share ideas with people. So thank you so much for making it not just me screaming out into the void, but actually being able to present these to somebody and have people say, oh, that was really cool. Oh, that was my favorite song. I didn't know that there were all these settings of Shakespeare songs, or I didn't even know that this composer existed. That's been a really special part of this project that has really sort of turned it around from just a pandemic project. And so, with our trip through the plays at least concluded, it is goodbye for now with SONGspeare. Thank you so much, and after clowning my way through these 15 episodes, I am ready to bid you adieu, and I will do it with music, which seems appropriate, and with the final lines of Twelfth Night. But that's all one, our play's done, and we'll strive to please you every day. On the 12th night of Christmas, Bill Shakespeare gave to me some born with greatness, some who achieve it, some with a thrust upon 'em, clowns who keep singing homoerotic friendship, sad pouting nobles, 6 happy lovers, cross-gartered stockings, gender roles reversed, 3 drunken fools, 2 shipwrecked twins, and a play named confusingly